that is kind of the core around which our approach has been developed. So it's about using soccer as a tool to promote health, well-being, to promote education, leadership skills, community development overall. So I like to say that soccer, football is just the tip of the iceberg. And so you see football, and anybody who's passing on the side of the road might see a group of kids playing football, but what they might not see initially, but after spending a few hours, a few days in the field with our kids, they'll quickly see that there's so much more underneath happening. And so, we've worked with over 3,000 youth, young people, boys and girls in the southwest and northwest regions of Cameroon. We are, investing in kids to become leaders, giving them skills, building their capacities. We just hired 4 new community leaders in Cameroon who are basically part-time employees. And 2 of them were program participants for one-time kids in our programs. And over the years, kind of grew up with us, and now we're able to give them a job. In addition to the 8 full-time staff that we have running our office, which is based out of Kumba in the southwest region of Cameroon.
Okay, well, that's an amazing point that you brought across in terms of the purpose behind the program that you're running. We know it's common knowledge that soccer is the most popular game in Africa. It can be said one of the most popular in the world. And when people pick up sports, when they want to play sports, some do it primarily for the pleasure of it. Some do it as an escape. Some do it to achieve an end, a means to an end. So what you said is that your purpose in doing this is to give younger kids a chance at life, at a better life, health-wise, education, and in so many other areas. And that's truly noble because, I haven't been in the sports space for a while. A lot of things have come to reveal themselves to me other than what I knew many years back. And one of those things is that sports has to have a meaning to people's lives, and I applaud you for taking that approach. Now, lately, I've noticed that you've been doing a drive. Can you tell us about that drive? You're collecting equipment and you're shipping equipment. What's the intent behind the drive?
Yeah, I like to say that our organization began with a bag of soccer balls, of footballs, and a vision to create positive impact in the lives of young people. And so, it really, even a few years before we started the organization, I was traveling to Cameroon as a student working on engineering projects, and I took over a suitcase full of cleats and a team set of jerseys and gave them out to young people in the village where we were working. And I immediately saw the impact that had. And, a couple years later, that experience influenced how a part of how our organization runs, and that we try to upcycle, soccer equipment, whether it be jerseys, soccer balls, cleats, shin guards that are oftentimes, in good condition. We only take high quality items, and what we do is we take them mostly from the Pittsburgh region, just because it's the most economical way. And there's a lot of great soccer organizations and institutions, academic institutions that have been supporting us over the years. And so we collect equipment here, and then we work with contacts that we have in the Cameroonian community living here in the U.S. That are based in, mostly in Maryland, but we just worked with a guy who is based, he's actually a former national team player, Pius.
Okay.
The national team in the late 80s, early 90s in Cameroon. Okay. And, so we worked with him, and we packed all this equipment in a container, and we ended up packing a lot more than we expected. Wow. And so we wanted to reach out to our supporters here in the Pittsburgh area and anywhere in the country, really, and ask for their support to help us ship, so we're closing in on that goal of we already had about 4 sponsors who agreed to sponsor a barrel of equipment donations, and so we got a local soccer organization sponsored, the extra gear that we had, and so we were looking for about 5 more barrels to get sponsored, and we're closing in on our goal. We've got about $450 to raise.
Okay.
So I think we'll get it hopefully by in the next few days here.
Okay. Now, let's look at what is going on in the world of soccer right now, especially as it pertains to the growth of the game here in the United States. In the years past, the United States has flirted with kind of growing the game here in the 80s and 90s when they had clubs like Cosmos, where the great Pele came and played. But things it didn't pan out during that time. It didn't pan out till we had a phenomenon called the soccer mom phenomenon in the late 90s into the early 2000s. And today, yes, today we have an explosion.
Yeah, my mom was one of those.
Well, there you go. See, there you go. Awesome. See, now we have a product there. There you go. So that's a good question. Exactly. So now we have an explosion of the game in America, and of course, with the United States and Canada and Mexico tipped to hosting the 2026 World Cup. What do you see as with what you're doing, the connection, the correlation with what you're doing in Cameroon and what's happening over here, and how could that benefit what you're doing in Cameroon?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's two sides to that story. I mean, I think it's a great question. Or there's two sides to that response, I guess. On the one side, yes, soccer, continues, to grow and develop, in this country, and it's come, miles, if not light years ahead of where it was a few decades ago.
Right.
But I think it's also important to know that, on the flip side of that is that, well, let me say, and with that, the increased awareness, the increased interest, it certainly looks good for an organization like ours that is so, soccer centric in our approach, and I don't doubt that the majority of our supporters are also, supporters of the game, whether it's, with their children or whether they played or whether they just like to follow along and watch, the leagues on the weekends. But on the flip side of that, the challenge that we're seeing in this country, and that is that this idea of the what's they call the pay to play model, and you see so many kids that are being priced out. Not even priced out. I mean, kids are quitting because the stakes are so much higher. It's so competitive. Everyone wants to get a scholarship, or everyone tries to get, or thinks that if they pay a couple $1,000s a year for their kid to play, they'll have a better chance of playing. And so you see a lot of kids, mostly from lower socioeconomic backgrounds, who just don't even have a chance, and who aren't even and some of whom have a lot of talent, who grow from these. You talk about soccer being the most popular sport in Africa and even the world, and so you've got a lot of kids that are coming from these different backgrounds, whether they were came here as immigrants, whether they were born here, regardless, they don't even have a chance to play at high levels. So they're being kind of just crowded out. And then you see that, you see the product of that with the U.S. national team,
right.
Not making the last World Cup. So what I do think, though, is that, one of the things that we're interested in starting to explore is how the model that we are using in Cameroon not only can be used in the developing world, but they could also be used here.
Right.
One thing we pride ourselves in is that it's very, neighborhood-centric. So a lot of kids that are living, for example, in, housing projects, right, or subsidized developments here in the U.S. Could potentially benefit from this model, right, where they could be playing high-level, high-quality soccer right in their neighborhood without having to, because their parents don't have the time or the luxury to, one, pay several $1,000s, and two, to drive them around to practice halfway across town 3 days a week in tournaments on the weekends, right?
Right.
So, but that, that's like the pipe dream, right? That's the...
Well, I wouldn't call that a pipe dream. I think that's a real dream. I think that's something that's real. I think you could get the support that you need to create something like that, because obviously there are many at-risk youth in your part of the country, in Pittsburgh and across the U.S. I see them here in Texas, in the Houston area where I live. So um, definitely, I think you have something there in terms of creating a parallel unit of Cameroon football development here in the United States, and I think that's especially with the focus now in the amount of funds that's going to be poured into the development of the game here in America itself. So I think you're on track to do something big, just outside. I mean, outside of Cameroon. Now let's go to Cameroon again. And Cameroon is going to be hosting the Africa Cup of Nations next year, from June 7th to the 30th. And I know with the program that you're running, obviously there are. I don't know if there are expectations in terms of you attending or having your team go to the Africa Cup of Nations because it's Cameroon. But what are the plans of the organization in relation to helping to promote the game and promoting Cameroon come Africa Cup of Nations 2019?
Yeah, honestly, it's a difficult question to answer because as we're looking at Cameroon hosting the tournament, there's been a lot of issues going on in Cameroon over the last 2 years. Many of them have sort of bubbled up over the last 6 to 12 months, even. So we're as an organization, we've been very limited in what we can do, simply in that it's been dangerous to travel for a lot of people in the region where we work. So we've been really confined to our neighborhoods, and we've been able to sort of, for example, teachers went on strike pretty much, for the last 2 years. Some schools have been in session, but a lot of kids are not in school, but we're still sort of able to support them in the field. And so honestly, we've been really struggling with overcoming these challenges of trying to sort of, support and run our programs despite the insecurity in the country. So we haven't even really had the chance to look ahead to the tournament. So it's quite unfortunate, We have talked with different groups. We're fortunate to be supported by FIFA, Football for Hope, and a part of a global network of organizations that are doing similar work as us all around the world. And in the conversations with them, they often host events alongside global sporting events such as the World Cup, in Russia, and such as the Women's World Cup in France next year. But in Africa, it's hard to find the sponsors and hard to find the support in general.
Tell me about it.
Years, it's been really difficult.
Yes.
And so, even for us to participate, we would need a sponsor.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
We're fortunate to have some great supporters, even in FIFA and in all of our donors here in the U.S. We got a grant this year to support our community leader initiative from a group called the Games for Good Foundation down in Florida. In the U.S. And so, we're really fortunate to have this support, but a lot of that support is limited to our programming, to support our programs and what we're doing. And so, for us to be able to really participate and really make an impact, we would need a sponsor. And it's been hard to find one in Cameroon, I won't lie to you.
That's for sure. And I'm witness to that. I can testify to that any day. Because I tell you what, I tell you, man, it's like pulling teeth, to get companies and businesses in Africa to understand the dynamics between sports and their business, and to them to realize or know that's the path of least resistance to grow in their business, to understanding that, yes, you want to connect with the community, you want to connect with people who could patronize your business, come into the sports space. That's where it's at,
That's where the people are, exactly.
Yeah, because that's where everybody is. You talk about exactly. The passion that people have for sports in Africa is immense, but it's not translatable to the economic side, the business side, and that's a conversation I had with in my last program, my last podcast program about the business of sports in Africa, and this is what we're trying to impress upon people and bring into their consciousness, that sports is an industry. It's a big business, and we're in the media space.